very much. We're really happy to be here, and I'm going to be defending the case that we should decriminalize hate speech. And the first thing that I'm going to say is that this is really important because it is the basis of freedom of speech, which is the basis for liberal democracies. Because in liberal democracies we are able to freely express our ideas, can we actually get communication between individuals, and can we actually lead to differences in ideas that lead to the basis of democratic thought? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a marketplace of ideas. And it is this idea that people should be able to express their opinions freely in order to make sure that people are able to decide which ideas are good and they're going to apply to their life and which ideas are not. It is in this way that we are able to form the basis for democratic thought, because we are able to choose that this idea is good and this idea is bad. Because hate speech is there and we acknowledge that hate speech is bad, we actually know that hate speech exists, and we are able to steer away from it. But the second point, and this is really important that I'm going to talk about, is that if you criminalize hate speech, you are only pushing these ideas underground. Like, the only way to know that these really vicious ideas exist is because people are expressing them freely in open forum. If you didn't know that these ideas existed because they're not being expressed in open forum, you would not know that there are people who think in this way, and you would only be exacerbating these hate sentiments. But moreover, you're not giving people the outlet to express their ideas, and therefore they are only going to do this elsewhere. For example, this could lead to violence and to actual things against certain groups of people because they're not expressing themselves.
So, I think this is a really interesting topic, but there are a few reasons why Bernardo's arguments are fundamentally wrong. So I'll start with my points though first. So first, we think that hate speech, even though first off, we think hate speech establishes relationships in society that are ultimately detrimental. Look at any genocide. What dehumanizing speech that creates different classes actually contributes to these movements of violence. It makes violence easier. So even if the speech in and of itself may not be harmful today or tomorrow, once it aggregates and actually becomes a social force, we think that it is harmful almost on a physical level and should be treated as such. Moreover, we just think that look at other instances of free speech that we think can be harmless. For example, the pornography industry. Everybody says that, look, people will believe that it's unrealistic. If it's really bad, it'll just go out of the public eye and be rejected. But that hasn't been true. Experts say that porn has fundamentally changed our expectations in relationships and has created ridiculous standards for women to live up to. So in that way, we could see the same thing happening. The more normalized hate speech becomes, even if people can reject the idea that it doesn't harm, but it actually does in ways that are unseen because it's just so normal. The third thing is that it actually is going to clog the marketplace of ideas, because we're going to see things like ad hominem becoming a very strong argument. The reason why it's a logical fallacy is because people use it and get away with it. If we criminalize it now, we can stop it.
Okay, so very interesting things coming from Alexa's speech right now. And the first thing that she talked about was the idea of how it establishes this detrimental society. She completely disregarded every single thing I said as to how, because we know that these hateful comments exist, are we able to do something about it? But most importantly, let's talk about the example of the Rwanda genocide, because she talks about how hate speech leads to genocide, and we believe that this is not true. In Rwanda, sentiments against the Hutu minority existed since long before the genocide, but they were kept quiet. They were kept quiet, and because they were kept quiet, eventually it led to an explosion of violence because people did not have an outlet to express their discomfort with the way their country was run. But moreover, we believe that it is really important to defend free speech, because it's what led to many societies. Like, right now you may think that some things people are saying are wrong, but that is exactly the same thing that, for example, the British thought of Gandhi, or white South Africans thought of Nelson Mandela. Just because someone is considered detrimental right now, it doesn't mean that they are not actually freedom fighters and will not lead to better things in the future. And her second argument was this idea of porn. First of all, I have no idea what she's talking about, because I have no idea how porn constitutes hate speech. But most importantly, if we look at her analyses, she says that people are not acknowledging that pornography is wrong. Well, I personally don't believe that pornography is wrong, but most importantly, there's plenty of examples in the world in which people do not, because they see hate speech, it doesn't mean that they acknowledge that it's right, but rather it's something they can fight against.
So most of Bernardo's speech wasn't actually attacking my points. It was morphing them into something different, constructing a straw man and then taking that down. Let me point out some examples. First, he gives the example of Rwanda, saying that because they didn't have an open forum for free speech in general, that's actually what led to the violence. That's not what I'm saying. That's just defending free speech in general. I'm saying that if you only, if we really want to solve the problem, are we going to allow them to shout ethnic slurs at each other? Like, this is not the thing we should be defending. I'm saying that, yeah, free speech is good, but not not hate speech. And the reason is because it can actually aggrandize into physical impacts, which we do criminalize already. Look, we told you that dehumanizing language contributes to violence because it makes it easier. He never actually refuted that fact or showed why it's wrong. If you are able to create different classes by entrenching certain language that dehumanizes one class below another, it makes it much easier to commit violence against them because you're not seeing them as a human in and of themselves. That logic was never refuted, so that still stands. It actually can have physically detrimental impacts, and at that point, there's no reason not to criminalize it. But the second thing, the porn analogy was completely misconstrued. My point was that it was an empirical example about how words can actually create unrealistic expectations without people really noticing the effects. It is true that women and men both are given unrealistic expectations from this, even though it's just considered in most cases harmless free speech. It shows that words do have the power to actually